What has been my favorite release to work on?
Well, that one I think is rather easy.
Definitely pot still.
Well, if you know a little bit my work, I can't help it. I gotta release 10 new products every year.
All the many releases I've worked on for Glenmorangie and Ardbeg.
I think our first release of our London Dry Gin, Junipero.
That's like asking me which of my children is my favorite.
What has been your favorite release to work on?
I think I've got two favorite releases. The first would be our first release of American Oak. I mean, that was the most important whiskey that we had done. And not just because it was the first release, but also because we were trying something fundamentally very new. You know, we were trying to make a single malt whiskey, but we weren't trying to copy a Scottish whiskey, more representative of the Pacific Northwest. Using roasted malts, Belgian yeast, new American Oak was a big risk when we first started this business.
One of my favorite releases that we've worked on quite recently has been Redbreast 27. When you're working on a brand like Redbreast, you have to be quite mindful of the tradition and the heritage associated with the brand and how it's always been made. When we worked on the 27-year-old edition, we took a small bit of an element of a risk by including a third type of barrel, a port pipe, into the formulation. Quite fun, introducing that element in terms of flavour. And I don't think it was much of a risk in the end. After working on different prototypes of that, we came up with something that we thought was quite good, and hopefully most people will like it when they taste it.
When I was doing my PhD, I was using infrared sensors, measuring the inside wall of a barrel. I could measure the wood extracts that would come out into your whiskey real quick. And the LCBO approached me at that time and said, we want to do a rare release in Ontario. I have these 78 barrels left over from my PhD. It's got a lot of rye content, some new wood, some used wood, just a mix mash of lots of different things. I said I could put all those 78 barrels together and make a whiskey. J.P. Weiser's dissertation, Dr. Don's PhD. Why it's my favorite release so far, it's Dr. Don's PhD in a bottle.
I will always remember, I was quite a young guy and I worked on gin for 5 years. I had convinced French customs I could actually use our cognac pot still to make Citadel gin. That was quite a journey. We started working on it in 1991 or 1992 and we released it in 1996. And grant you, that's a project that almost took us to bankruptcy. That was a very special, very strong, for the better, for the worst moment. And I'm so proud now to see that Citadel is doing great. At the very beginning, it was a tough commercial experience, but technically was an incredible ride.
It was really the first craft distilled gin, totally a different set of things to learn from distilling whiskey, and we felt a sense of accomplishment in releasing that.
Pot still would have been my first release. It would have been very important at that time to show everyone what I'm made of. For me to be able to honor the tradition of making Montgay through pot still, which is how we've made rum for the past 300 plus years, was definitely an honor. The pot still was my favorite release.
I think that last year's Masters collection, the Woodford Reserve Chocolate Malted Rye, such a special product. It not only in flavor profile, it's got all these wonderful chocolatey notes that really are surprising in the fact that they melt into these spicy, minty, dry characteristics as opposed to the nose of it, which is very indulgent, sweet chocolate. Really loved that product, and I worked on it even as new make. So when it came off the stills, when I was working in our research and development lab and quality control taste testing, I loved it then. It had these chocolatey notes as new make, and I have gotten to nurture it and care for it all the way through to maturation.
The whiskey that I'm creating at that moment in time is my favorite, and always the best is yet to come. What's very much in my mind at the moment is some exciting new whiskey that's coming out very, very soon, and that's kind of my favorite at the moment because that's what I'm making. Drinkers around the world will get to hear about it very soon. I'm working with some of the most eclectic casks, creating what I hope people will think are some of the most multi-layered, complex, integrated, delicious single malt whiskies they've ever tasted. This has been my favorite to work on.
I think probably my favourite was Glenmorangie Private Edition number 3 Arcane. And the reason that was probably my favourite is that I liaised with one of my favourite vineyards, Sassicaia in Italy. I loved the product. It was incredibly complex and elegant. And I just loved the opportunity to actually hold the launch event in Tuscany at the Sassicaia vineyard. So that was really a fabulous experience.
The other really exciting release, our first edition of Garryana, which is made with a local species of white oak called Quercus garryana. This was something that we had been working on for years, starting in 2011, but it wasn't until 2016 that we did our first release with whiskey matured in this oak. We weren't the first distillery to use Garryana oak, but I think we were the first to really talk about it and champion its qualities. To be able to share that with the world, this thing that we had in our warehouse, that was really, really exciting. Nobody else had really tasted Garryana oak flavor before, and it was an important moment for us as a brand.